So how did you feel when I would be on my phone when you're trying to talk to me?
Am I interesting enough to keep his attention? Because whatever's dinging on his phone is somehow a little bit more interesting than me. Maybe there is something else that's more exciting than me. So I always felt like a little bit of competition if I'm not really interesting enough. And then the first ding, he's going to be like, oh, got to go check that.
And it created a level of conflict in our marriage because I didn't fully understand what it was stealing from our relationship. This is Behind Our Smiles.
Pursuing connection.
And finding joy.
Even in the struggle.
And welcome back to another episode of the Behind Our Smiles podcast. We are Joe and Tara Buchanan. We're so grateful to be hanging out with you.
And one of our favorite parts of the podcast is hearing from you. And we especially love to hear what it is that makes you smile about your husband or wife.
Yeah, and today Trent is sharing about his wife, Heather. And he starts by saying, my Heather, which I love, by the way. He says, my Heather values relationships over material objects. She encourages me to grow in my walk with Christ and the spiritual discipleship of our sons. She takes time to make me feel special.
You sound like a very
That's
lucky
incredible,
man,
yes.
Trent. And thank you for sharing that. We just love hearing those little things. And some of it's, the big things. But I like this idea that, hey, she takes time
to make me feel special.
And so if you feel special, that was on purpose and not an accident.
And we would love to hear from you about what makes you smile about your husband or wife. And you can share that with us by simply emailing us, Tara, T-A-R-A, at behindoursmiles.com.
So the question is, can I have your attention, but with a caveat?
Yes.
You have to put your phone down.
Really?
That's going to be...
Well, what happens when I get a text?
You'll have to just ignore it for this one episode.
But what if it's really driving me crazy?
Well, in all honesty, we do have to really be intentional about putting devices on silent when we're trying to record, because otherwise it is so distracting. Okay. So what is it that keeps us from paying attention to our husband or wife or the people in our lives that do need our undivided attention? And the number one answer for 500 points is, where's our sound effect, Joe? Ding!
The phone? That?
Are you also looking around you right now going, wait, what is it?
Yes.
It's okay. It's on us.
Do you know what's really funny is I am manufacturing this ding right here. I'm making it. But even as I do it, I'm instinctually looking for my phone that I'm actually holding in my hand. And I know I'm making the sound, but I'm like, and I guarantee there are people listening right now that are like, what? Huh?
Well, and sometimes if I hear the ding, I'm also going, I'm running through my head 15 different things it probably could be. Like, I'm waiting to hear from this. I wonder if it's that. Or, even good things and bad things, our brains are so wired to divert what we're doing and going, it could be something else that's going on. So we're going to try to tackle this the best we know how, because we're in it with you.
And we're going to try to do it without being distracted by the phone.
We're going to try to do it. We'd okay, this is definitely one of those areas where we're working on ourselves with our marriage. But I feel like, Joe, we're in a little bit better place. I feel like even up to a couple years ago, I might have been like, oh, I don't want to talk about phones because I'm a little salty about it. But I feel like we've turned a corner, and I feel like it's not a source of huge tension in our marriage. Do you feel like we've grown a bit?
Yeah. But back to the word salty, what about it made you salty?
It was hard to get your undivided attention. Now, so we talked about that we do spend intentional time together. We are very good about that. But I'm even okay, coffee time and our date. The phone is always on the pocket, in the hip. And I know the minute there was a ding, it was like, ooh, it's I have to stop my thought. And it could be anything. So, and then maybe...
And sometimes it was important things, right?
Sometimes
it still is.
Let's talk about percentages,
we can talk...
percentages.
Yeah, go ahead.
How many, life and death situations were those dings? I mean, maybe
No, if you're talking life and death, I've never had a life and death situation.
No, I mean something that seriously
you needed my attention
to fix this.
There were for instance, I work in radio, and if we're off the air, that's something that has to be addressed.
Or even with we have children that are driving, and if they say there was an accident or something, we're on it. So I do feel like there's a percentage of super duper important ones. So, but I think the catch with the problem and why I got salty is you check and say, this is not important, right? But then while you were there, it was like, oh,
might as well respond.
There's this, and this. I didn't realize too, this came up in my calendar, and there's a sale on this software I was just researching yesterday. And look at the scores in the game. And suddenly it was like, I couldn't wheel you back in.
Yeah.
You're like, what were you talking about, honey?
And I think in full disclosure, I was probably not the best at even letting you complete a sentence.
Yeah.
The technology was new, first of all, right?
It
was like these things are happening, and that's totally on me. But yes, I can rabbit trail and get lost in a rabbit hole with the best of them.
Because I think the potential issues with our digital world right now is we are always on call and we are always reachable. And in some ways, that's such a huge blessing. I mean, I love it, like, especially with our kids and our grown kids. Like, okay, if I need to get a hold of them, I can. Our parents did not have that luxury. They had to sit there and just sweat it out. So I love that I can get a hold of you anytime. I love that we can find anything out that we need to find out at any time. It's really cool. But the downside is
it's a thief to
always,
our undivided
You're always
attention.
on call, right? I mean, you do work office hours, but there's an element of like leaving the office at the office is really difficult, or leaving anything in any place. And even for myself, it's like there used to be like I go to the library to look for what I want to read, and now I can do that any time of day from anywhere I'm at. I don't have to say this is library time. It can be all the time. So I think the catch is, how do we balance this idea that we are always available to everybody all the time?
And I think for us, it was, just about over 10 years ago that we both got smartphones. They were on the market already and people were using them. And I think a couple of things happened. One is we didn't realize how much of our attention because the technology is so cool.
Right.
But also the technology has developed a lot to help with that. Back then, there was no way to know what message was coming in. For instance, if you got a ding, it could be from anybody. It could be from my boss. It could be
from Walmart.
From our kids. It could be that your dinner is ready. Whatever the case was, so you had to check it. And what would happen is I would try to leave it in my pocket or leave it over on the shelf while we were talking. But the whole time we're talking, I'm thinking, what is on that phone? I need to figure this out. So then I wasn't paying attention, even when I was trying to pay attention. And the real heart of the problem is that there's just no way to prioritize all of the incoming information, especially when you didn't know what that information was. You just know that you had information, and then it would ding again, and then it would ding again.
Just all these dings, and they all just get caught in your mind. I think the other interesting thing about smartphones technology, and I guess screens in general too, is that there's no end to searching. And there's the internet goes on forever. I remember one time my son was talking about Facebook. So if I'm scrolling through Facebook on my phone, I think my son asked me when he was about 7 or 8, Mom, how far down does Facebook go? Like, I think said like 3 miles. Like almost like if you're scrolling down, how far can you dig? And I was trying to explain, like, it never ends. It like kind of never ends. You don't ever say, you're done. You may exit Facebook now. There's always more. And I think any app is like that. It's designed to say there's no ending point to your digital time. There's always more. Check this link for more here. Refresh, add more threads, add more search engines, the next page. So it's like literally overload. And for me, I like getting more information. I'm kind of like an information junkie. Like, I want more. Show me more. Give me more reviews on that product, another page reviews, and check this page out. But there's no end. So how do you... if you want my attention, I'm just going to look at some reviews on this product. That could take a long time to read all the reviews on a product.
Well, and there's more and more and more and more information. In fact, if we go back to a date in 1994, there's a date, it's in May somewhere, where the amount of information from that day to the end of history prior, right, all the way back to the beginning of history, there's more. We consume more information in one day than the world did from May of 94 all the way back combined. And so there's just so much information, and information is fun, like you said. There's an enjoyable pleasure about finding
access
things
to whatever
out,
it is we need to know. And I think that's why there's my saltiness about this is, and it's to me too. So I'm guilty as well. If I'm probably, my kids maybe don't get my attention as much for my phone, but hey, I want to get this, gadget. Let me go check the reviews. So but if you say that, or if I say that, you're like, how long will this take to check the reviews on a product? There's no end to it.
It can be crippling in a way
So
because you've got so much
you had
information.
so much
right?
information. So my mind going, this is not like just opening up the phone book and getting a number or opening up Consumer Reports and reading an article. It's like it never ends. So I think that's the catch with this never ending
So when you say
piece.
salty, you saw firsthand this impact our marriage.
Because you'd say,
right?
I just want to check this product and see if it's on sale.
Don't you love the word just?
Or
I just want to check
let me
that.
see if it's cheaper somewhere else. Like, I just want to do this one thing. Now, granted, you have all the freedom in the world to do those things. The catch was like, if it was dividing our attention, if I was like, hey, or the whole line of, I'm going to check the prices on this gadget while I talk to you.
Or the score in the game.
While I talk to you.
I mean, think about how incredible this technology was that we basically have this computer in our hand that we can check without even getting off the couch. I don't have to go to a keyboard and a monitor somewhere. I can actually do that. So it was very enticing. And I think sometimes my intentions were right, where I said, okay, I'm spending time with you, but then the ding would just,
I think what we're trying to say is, if your phone is out in some capacity and you were checking it and you're not making full eye contact with your spouse or your children or whoever it is that maybe needs your attention, that doesn't count as quality time.
So how did you feel when I would be on my phone when you're trying to talk to me, or I would go right to my phone? Like we would sit down and normally we'd have a conversation and I would just go right to my phone. How did that make you feel?
Well, I think what happened, and I know we talked about the fact that maybe I ramble a little bit here, ramble here a little bit. Sorry, y'all. But am I interesting enough to keep his attention? Because whatever's dinging on his phone is somehow a little bit more interesting than me. Now, I understand you have me all the time. I'm always there. And there's something more exciting on your phone. Like, is that what it is? Like, maybe there is something else that's more exciting to me. So I always felt like a little bit of competition. Like, if I'm not really interesting enough or grabbing his attention, then the first ding, he's going to be like, oh, got to go check that. Or let me check the weather or check the score or check the bank or check something else that you're distracted from.
And I think we had some pretty intense conversations early on, right? I mean, it created a level of conflict in our marriage because a part of it was, well, I'm actually doing this for the family, or I'm actually trying to get this done, or this actually is helping me with this, or whatever it was. And I didn't fully understand the level of what it was stealing from our relationship. And so through working through that conflict and just having conversations about it, I began to realize, and I think when you said that part, am I interesting enough? Can I hold your attention? I'm feeling like I'm not enough. I'm not worthy enough because you're
your undivided attention.
Right. That was for me a big turning point to go, wait a minute, you are way more important than my phone or whatever is on my phone. And if I'm not communicating that, I need to make an adjustment.
Well, again, and part of it is that we all know there are certain calls you have to take, and there is that element of work. There's not life-saving, but like going, thank goodness we have this technology to really help us out in certain situations. But the times that you were distracted from your phones was not those situations. It was, well, let me see what's going to rain on Tuesday. I'm like, do we need to know if it rains on Tuesday right this minute? Now, hey, if it's a tornado siren and it's giving you alerts saying there's a tornado on the ground, hey, thank God for technology. Those are good things, but I think it's looking at that balance of, okay, I want to do this instead of you and this instead of you. So we had to kind of just work it out to how to spend intentional time together and still, our phones could be in the room. We're not going to just like hide them under a cushion, but having that self-control to go, I don't have to stop at every tiny little ding.
Well, and I think you also just kind of putting words in your mouth maybe, but I think you...
What do you think, Joe?
Well, because we've talked about this, I happen to know this, but you honestly were asking the question, are we ever alone, right? Do we ever have time with just you and me? And that was another big thing for me, was like, wait a minute, why is anyone and everyone on that phone invading our space and our time together?
Well, I think because you do have a lot of contacts, Joe, and I think there was a time where you do a really good job keeping in contact with a lot of your friends. I mean, that's, again, what the phones are helpful with. And you have people you keep in contact with and you text with them and you give them your time of day. And I appreciate that about you. But there's an element of going, I think we're having coffee with me, you, and Mike. I think Mike is with us right now because we seem to be including him in our conversation. So, hey, either Mike's part of our conversation this morning, or we need to tell Mike that I'm not, if someone came up to our house, if we're sitting outside, we wouldn't invite him to sit down necessarily. We would actually, but we wouldn't call it a date.
Right, but if a salesman's coming by the door,
Yes.
just people are randomly knocking on the door, that's an interruption, but
Right.
you can leave the door shut.
Yeah.
The problem with the phone
Is the door's open.
is the door's open and they're in our living room. I mean, they're in our space wherever we are. And so it took us a little while to figure out what the phone actually was doing. It was actually eroding aspects of our relationship that we had worked hard to build.
Well, and I think it reminds me a little bit of when cell phones first came out and the whole issue of talking on the phone and driving. Remember at the beginning, we kind of just all did that, like as not realizing it might not be a good idea. And I think of someone who said, there's certain news you shouldn't receive while you're driving at 75 miles an hour. Like, is this information you should have when you're merging onto a highway? So I think the same way, there's times that we are in a good place and we're having a good conversation and it is just me and you. And the text shows up of someone maybe that is not a positive contribution or something that leads a level of, it changes our mood. So it's like someone coming in our room that's not necessarily invited.
Or has a different approach, right?
And, again, and maybe that's a salesman, and you get your spam texts coming in. Or it's a conversation you don't necessarily want to have at that moment. It's like they are walking your living room. You're going, did I invite them in here? Did I want to talk to this person today? And so I think that's the hard part of that boundary of saying, I want to feel like I'm alone in the room with you. And there's not someone always knocking the door saying, hey, Joe. And you being a polite person, you do have a sense of like, hey, someone's knocking my door. I should answer it and say hi. And I'm like, yes, you should. But they keep knocking.
Well, and it's not only that. I appreciate that, by the way, but it was also for me, I had to come to the understanding that I am prioritizing you. And to prioritize you means that I say yes to you, means I say no to other things. And I think I was very frustrated in the beginning. I didn't always handle it well. Like you kind of would just stop talking to me if you saw me move to my phone or if I was on my phone, and I'd be like, finish your thought. I can multitask.
Listen and talk at the same time.
And it would frustrate me because you would just say, no, I'm going to wait. And your eyes were drilling a hole in me, But I think over time, I began to understand that it really was eye contact that you were looking for. It really was undivided attention, where if I could there would be plenty of time for the phone. I just need to make this time our time.
The phone will steal it like almost without asking, right? It's not you're not gonna go, oh shoot, I forgot. Well, I do sometimes just completely forget to check my phone, and I'm like, oh whoops, I should have seen that. But I think with the interruptions, so Joe, if we're in a time where we are kind of having we'll call it kind of a sacred space. We're like, okay, let's just put distractions aside and spend time together. If you do have to check, I'm like, hey, if there is an issue that you have to deal with, like I'm fine with that, but don't try to multitask. Like I'll put our conversation on pause. You finish it, what it is you need to finish, and then you come back to me. Like just as if you had gotten a phone call back in the day when the phone just rang randomly and you didn't know who it was. You'd say, excuse me, I'm gonna take a call. You wouldn't take the call and then never come back. You'd hang up and say, "Oh, that was Grandma." And
because in those early days, it really was like that. It was like, "Well, I thought you were texting so and so." What? I mean, I'm like 12 things down the road now because it's got my attention.
You texted so and so. You followed this link.
Right.
Back to the weather. I'm sorry for keeping the weather up, but you love checking your weather. I'm like, I don't care if it rains on Tuesday. So I think we have made some adjustments in getting the balance back. And I think it's something we have to always working on because the technology keeps changing. Maybe 10 years ago, it was just texts. Now it's texts and it's this and so there's so many things happening that we have to constantly be adapting to the new technology.
Well, I think I had to come to this understanding, and it's going to sound so simple, but I had to come to the understanding that the phone is there to serve me. I'm not there to serve the phone. And so if I can put it in its proper place, then everything kind of gets healthier. So yeah, you and I had to kind of work through this idea of boundaries, right? Of saying, okay, when is the phone there? How, like you had said just a minute ago, one of the things that I tried really hard, and I'm not perfect at it, but to make an adjustment to say, excuse me for a second, I'm going to check.
Yes.
I just heard the phone ding or vibrate. Yes.
I really think this is a small adjustment that's huge, which is common courtesy. We sometimes can forget that in marriage. Like if it's a stranger, just to say, excuse me. If you have to get up off the table and leave a conversation, you say, excuse me. I have to go to the bathroom. Excuse me. I have to take a call. So I think to say, excuse me, Tara, something came up. with this situation. I have to attend to it. I shouldn't be more than a few minutes. And I'm like, cool, you're excused. Like, go. Yeah. But to kind of leave without telling me where you're going and what you're doing if we're in a conversation, like, and you're beep, 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 beep. I'm like, are you playing a game? Are you, trading stocks? Like, I think that's the catch with the phone. Like, you could be doing anything. Like, at least back in the day with the newspaper, I could say, okay, he's on the sports section. He's checking the sports section, or he's on the comic book section. It looks like he's reading a comic. He's on the crossword section. He's doing a puzzle. But when you're on your phone, I think the problem was you have no idea what that person is actually attending to and whether or not it's a crossword puzzle or it's an urgent message.
Right. And I think, I appreciate that a lot. And that's exactly right. And there were times, Tara, when we were in a conversation, like you're making dinner and I'm kind of getting home from work or whatever, and I'm not thinking it's a really, you need my divided attention type conversation. So I can move on to this and you'll turn around from stirring whatever and you'll see me on my phone, and that's hurtful, right? Yeah. Because you're like, I thought you were talking to me, and I didn't, realize at the moment. It took me a while to figure that out, that wait, that is, if someone else is there and that phone, I'm texting with someone or I'm doing something else, I really am kind of keeping you in a three-way conversation without even telling you you're in a three-way conversation.
Now, I do appreciate when you have to take time away from my attention. This is kind of assuming that, like, we're in a conversation. Like, obviously, you don't have to, like, tell me every time you take a phone call. And obviously, we're not always together. But to say, hey, and excuse me, but let me know what's going on. Like, it's a way to peek into your life. Hey, so-and-so is asking about next week. I'm going to get back to them. Or this is the mechanic who's calling to check on this. And it's kind of looping me into your life, rather than feeling like you have a whole nother life on your phone. Like, hey, here's what I'm doing. Hey, honey, I have to go on here and pay some bills. I just found out there's a discrepancy, so let me go work this out. And I appreciate that versus me going, what are you doing that's so important?
So here's a few adjustments that Tara and I made that I think made a huge difference. One is we defined boundaries. Said, okay, what is our sacred no phone time? And in some cases, we may have to turn the phone off. Just turn it off. Whatever's happening, it can just wait. And where are those spaces within our marriage that we want that?
We have to be, and I think that's where it's have to be reasonable. And I think the conversation is probably going to be tense or salty to go, what is a reasonable amount of time to say those sacred spaces? 'Cause especially, again, some people's jobs and lifestyles, you really do need to be in a level of contact with things. But to say, I need to feel that at some point there is an undivided attention. And some of that is planning ahead too. Like, before we sit down, are all of your conversations wrapped up? Do you have any pressing business that you've not finished before you can? Because sometimes you'll start a conversation with me and go, oh, yeah, I forgot I'm talking to this guy too. And so you're balancing 4 or 5 different conversations. Like, when you are done talking, so someone's planning ahead for those sacred spaces to say, here's a time, all of our business is wrapped up. I can put the phone down and feel reasonably safe that we're not going to be disrupted.
Yeah, and so that was a huge help because then I'm freed to give you my undivided attention. I'm not worried about what's dinging over on the shelf or whatever. I think another thing that's really helped is technology in and of itself. There's some new tools, like for instance, I have a sound, and then my phone vibrates a certain way when you text me, or the kids, or my boss, for instance.
You have like the small circle.
Yes, where everybody else has the generic. So if it's in my pocket and I'm having a conversation with you, obviously you wouldn't be texting me. But if it's my boss, I can say, honey, my boss is texting me. I need to check this. But if it's not, then I can ignore that. You don't even need to know that I had that ding in my pocket.
Well, I'll tell you something. If you want to know an act of love,
yeah,
right? You want to wow your spouse. Have a conversation, have your phone buzz, and just act like it never happened. And just keep talking. And at some point, your spouse is going to say, is your phone, you got something going on? You got a text? Hey, I'll get to that in 3 minutes. You're like, the first time you did that, I'm like, okay, this is growth, that you like literally ignored the buzz for a solid 3 minutes. And then I think after I finished my thought or something, you're like, hey, do you mind if I check that?
Yeah.
And I'd like even asking, like, hey, would that bother you if I checked that? And like, when you ask me, I'm like, oh yeah, go check it. I bet it's important.
So I remember that because here's what happened. I had made a decision because of conversations that we've had. I said, I have to physically grow in this area. If I don't, it's never going to happen. I have to make the decision to say Tara's more important than whatever's on the phone. And I remember in the first times you do that, it really is, it's like putting candy in front of the kid and telling them not to eat it, right? It's just hard to do.
I gotta know.
But you know what was really the most incredible thing about that was the way you responded, Tara. I literally thought it was as if I'd given you $1 million. The amount of filling that did for you, and the amount of value that you felt, because we talked about it afterwards, just made me want to do it over and over. Like, people text me and I won't respond just so my wife can hear the buzz.
Well, I always felt bad for that. And again, I do think there is value in our investing in our relationships. And I mean, I could probably do better at like returning texts to people, right? We all struggle with that too. Like, how do we balance that? Like, hey, if there's someone that's texting me, I want to get back to them. So you're good about that. And I think I've kind of seen you adjust to say, I want to get back to this person. But waiting 15, 20 minutes will not make them feel unloved. Like, they'll be okay. We all like to know the person received our text, but we also all know that you can only do what you can do. Yeah. But even like during our boundary time, our sacred space too, you see the buzz, you go, oh, it's a notification for this? Not important. Like, not important. And you can put it right down. Yeah. I'm like, okay, that's cool. And then, the other part of the story, Joe, which is the part I don't know, but the cool thing is when we're not together, that when I text you, you're pretty good about getting back to me right away. And I know that often means you have to excuse yourself from a conversation with someone else and say, excuse me, this is my wife. She's asking a really important question, or a completely irrelevant, not important question that means nothing. But I know that my response to her will light her up if I just give her a smiling emoji. So I like being on the receiving end of that too, to say, hey, when it comes to you receiving text and all that I'm the top of your list. And again, at this point, our kids, I'm always like, when I hear a buzz, I'm like, I have things going on in my life, but it's my kids. I'm always like, those are the ones I want to make sure that if there's anything going on with them, we can catch to it right away.
Based on things I've learned from you, Tara, I do try to make, there's the phone again. I do try to make the phone
just a minute, let me check that.
Yeah, no, hey, lack of a priority when I'm in conversation with others. And there are times when I'm at work or whatever, I'm entering a meeting, I will text you and say, hey, I'm going to be in a meeting for the next couple of hours. I won't be able to, if it's an emergency, just keep texting me. If not, just let it go.
I think that's one element too, because I do like texting you throughout the day and I like hearing back from you. But in the morning, when we're having our intentional coffee time together, I do ask about your day. So you tell me ahead of time, hey, from here to here, I'm busy. So feel free to text me. I can't respond to you. So then I know not to expect a response, or I know, hey, if it's super urgent, I'm going to have to go through other avenues if I absolutely positively need your undying attention. But I also know too, again, when you're at work, your attention is divided. I can't expect your undivided attention when you're at work. It's common sense. So, but I do appreciate you dividing your attention and giving me some of it. There
are so many times at work that honestly, I leave my phone on my desk. Yeah, I do. I'll go too much, meet with other people, the team, throughout the day, and I'll be like, you know what? No one's called or texted me in a while, and I'll realize my phone's not even on me. Yeah. But there's something incredibly freeing about not having to be tied to the phone as well. Right. I think the cool thing is, like I mentioned earlier, you can use our digital devices and our technology to bless each other. I mean, I think there's been a lot of blessing in that, again, in the fact that we can have these conversations with people from all over the world all at the same time, right? We have 15 active tech conversations. So I think the fact that we can still use the texting as a way of giving each other some divided attention when we're not with each other. I enjoy that. Like, I know you're busy, but you're thinking of me. And I do like the fact that we can do those different ringtones. What is that app they can do? Is that through Apple? How do you get the different ringtones? Oh, yeah, it's just through Apple. And then you can buy ringtones too. But yes. To be able to say, hey, when I hear this ringtone, I know this is person high in my list. And if it's not, I probably can wait 5 or 10 minutes if I'm trying to give my attention to something else. So I do appreciate you working through that. I think it's something we have to keep our eye on, though, because fortunately, technology, I feel like technology is working with these things to say we all know how distracting these things are and how can we make technology work better for us without hurting relationships. Right. Because I think not just husband and wife, but with our kids have grown up seeing mom and dad on their phone, right? Like, we didn't have that memory. Right. Well, we did see moms on the nice 80s phones stretched across the hallway, with 25-foot cords. But, in fact, the other day ago, I was talking to you on the phone and you were in a place, you only had 3 minutes to talk and we really had to have a conversation. Again, and my son was like miming to me, like, I have a question for you.
And I was trying to like listen to both of you at the same time. I'm like, I have to listen to Joe. He's giving me very important information right now. Like it was very crucial and time sensitive. And meanwhile, I'm like, my kids asked me for attention like last year, but is this time sensitive? Is something on fire? And I'm like, can you hold? I'm like I didn't want to tell you to hold. And finally, I'm like, just be quiet and wait. But I wasn't only listening to you halfway because I was trying to listen to him and you. And then I got the phone with you. And for him, it was like, not sensitive. They're not time sensitive. I'm like, you can wait. If I'm on the phone with Dad, just give me 3 minutes. It's really hard to do two things at once when it comes to taking care of people. So,
and our kids,
use
for the
our
most
tools
part,
to help us.
are pretty good at that. There's just sometimes. And, like even I walk into the room, I won't look at what you're doing, and I'll just start asking questions. I mean, these things do happen at time. But
I think to include, the phone shouldn't be dividing our marriage, but it can help bring us together. And I think part of that too is communicating about what activities we're involved in. And I think it's okay. Just like if I have a book open, hey, what you reading, babe? Or you got the newspaper open back in the day. Hey, honey, how's those Cubs doing? So I think sometimes we say, hey, what are you working on? Not in an accusing way, but to say we're in each other's lives and say, well, guess what? I'm playing this new game and I just received level 500. Like just share those things so we can be more included in each other's lives and the phones don't like, what are they doing? And what are they interested in?
Whole other podcast. But Tara and I both have, she has access to my phone anytime she wants it and vice versa.
Let me see what you're doing. Yeah,
exactly. So just to recap, I really will go on the record as saying that the adjustments that we made with the phone really were huge for our marriage. I mean, it
snuck in. I think it snuck in so slowly over the years.
Right. The negativity on the phone side. Yeah, but the intentional choices to say, Tara, you are more important than what's going on my phone. I see that play out in our marriage all the time. So I'm really grateful, Tara, that you're willing to kind of work through that conflict with me and really work through that and say, hey, what does that look like?
And being fair to you too, because I think for a while it could be unfair to say you shouldn't ever look at your phone ever. Like, okay, that's not fair. I know that I wouldn't put that same standard on myself. So I go, okay, for me, I think with me and you, I'm okay, but my kids, with being home all day, balance it out. And I think me trying to say to them, hey, let me finish this conversation with so-and-so. And I'll even include them in. I am helping to set up a play date for you, child, whatever. Or I am trying to take care of a need of yours on my phone. You said you needed new shoes. I'm taking care of that. I will get you in 3 minutes. And then holding myself to my word, not getting lost in the rabbit trail and saying, hey, I finished that task I was doing. What do you need from me? So I know there's still areas I need to grow to say, making sure my kids and the people in my life do have undivided attention. And I don't feel like I'm always looking at something else.
Right. And since we just did this podcast, I guarantee tomorrow we're going to have a conflict over our phone.
But we have podcasts and podcasts are on phones. So they're fun. And this is not even talking about earbuds, Well, the earbuds are a new thing too. Like, are you listening to something? Are you listening to me? What are you listening to? Are you listening to Behind Our Smiles podcast this week? Well, thank you for listening. We appreciate it so very much. We'd love to hear from you. If you have your own thoughts, please share them. You can email us anytime, Tara@behindoursmiles.com. Would also love to hear what makes you smile about your husband or wife. And you send us an email, I'll get a little ding. Yes. And I'll go, I wonder who that is. And she'll interrupt the conversation with guess what, honey? Would love to hear from you. Thanks to our producer, Mark Stubanger. Your 5-star rating and review are huge. They help others to find the podcast. So thank you for doing that. We really appreciate it. And if you spend time on Facebook, on your phone or on your computer, we are on Facebook at Behind Our Smiles, and we're on Instagram on Behind Our Smiles Pod. So you have permission to go like us on Facebook or on Instagram. Not pretend though. Is that distracting you from anything else? All right. Thanks for joining us today. Are you going to check that?